Illumination and Nintendo's shared Mario universe has already been a massive success for both companies, and although reviews may vary, both films have racked up billions of dollars in the global box office, earning acclaim from many generations of Mario fans. However, with Seth Rogen's Donkey Kong notably absent from the recent sequel, many are wondering if a solo feature for the gaming gorilla is next in line from the studios. Discussing all that and more in this week's episode of Snack Break. Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Snack Break, the perfect podcast pop on while preparing your cup of tea or ideal snack or beverage. Coming up in this episode, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We're going to be kicking things off by talking about all things MCU. No, silly, not the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Of course, it's Illumination and Nintendo's Mario Cinematic Universe. Yes, after the success of the first two Mario movies, it looks like we're going to be getting a Donkey Kong movie, so we'll chat about that later. Brand new host has been announced for Radio 2's Breakfast Show. That's Sarah Cox. We'll be chatting everything to do with that later. And in Bendigo's Musical Musings, we'll be reviewing HRL's brand new live album. Let's get into it, so please, ready that cup of tea and enjoy. Let's now talk about Illumination and Nintendo, because a previously filed copyright seems to be suggesting that there's a Donkey Kong movie in the way, with currently looking at a release of April 2028. I'm reading this off Video Games Chronicle. They say that's according to the newly updated release schedule on the movie studio's Spanish website. It always comes from like some other website that you never expected to appear on, which was updated on April 23rd to add, among other things, a new Nintendo collaboration. It's currently called an Untitled Illumination/Nintendo event film, which is scheduled to release on April 12th, 2028. And unsurprisingly, it is, of course, listed as an animation project. Although, that being said, there is Nintendo's A Legend of Zelda movie coming out next year. I'm just going to get the exact date now. I believe it's May. Yes, it's 7th of May, 2028. That is starred Benjamin Even Ainsworth and Bo Bergasson as respectively Link and Princess Zelda. Screenshots of what we've seen from that so far already look very, very exciting, to say the least. But we're not here to talk about that today. We are here to talk about, actually, I wonder when we'll get, we're still over a year away, so we probably won't get a trailer for a little bit, but we don't know. Filming has wrapped. So that's very, very exciting. But as I said, we are not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about Donkey Kong specifically and Illumination's continued collaboration with Nintendo. We all knew that Nintendo and Illumination were going to continue collaborating. In my opinion, I really liked the first Mario movie. I thought it was very much a solid movie. I thought it was actually Illumination with the power of Nintendo combining to sort of do their best work yet. Mario Galaxy movie, less solid. We did a full episode on that last week. 2 weeks ago with our last episode 20 of Snap Break. You can listen to that. We had the amazing A-Plays996 and King Art Games on, who I went to go see the movie with to discuss a lot of our pros and cons with that issue. But with regards to Donkey Kong, we sort of knew that this was on the way because a copyright was filed a little while ago, and a lot of news came out last June about that. And there were obviously a lot of rumors at the time that this was going to be a Seth Rogen-fronted Donkey Kong film. This is looking increasingly likely, and we do now have this attached date of April 2028. And it's also, I think, only helped along by the fact that Nintendo has showed a massive push for Donkey Kong in the last year. We've had Donkey Kong Bonanza, which was obviously hugely successful, choosing to launch the Switch 2 with Mario Kart World. And instead of having a Mario Odyssey straight away in that place almost, we had Donkey Kong Bonanza, which came into massive critical acclaim, obviously gaining there the Mario stardom of Paulina, who I think is a very well-recognised character by this point, at least within the Nintendo fans. And for the Ultra fans, it was certainly very, very exciting to get to see a little bit of a prequel to Paulina, if you will. We got Amiibo to do with it. We've had a bunch of interesting Donkey Kong stuff. We even got that sort of Mario versus Donkey Kong, what did they call it? Mario versus Donkey Kong, like, puzzle game that came out in the latter years of the Switch, like a year or two ago. Believe it was last year. Yes, it was Mario versus Donkey Kong for the Nintendo Switch. I don't know if anybody played this, I'm going to be honest. I don't know how well that sold. It could have sold really well. I just didn't see anybody talking about it. But basically, it was a puzzle game combining Mario and his original enemy, Donkey Kong. And that idea of Donkey Kong being the original enemy of Mario is sort of played on quite nicely in the original movie. But interestingly, no sign of Donkey Kong in Mario Galaxy. Further, seems to evident that we're going to be getting more Donkey Kong for a character that had quite a big role in the original. It seems pretty strange, the first film. It seemed pretty strange that he wouldn't make any appearance really in. Oh, apparently he was. I didn't see. He appears very briefly in the Yoshi cameo, but really we don't see him. I'll sort of suggest he's out there doing stuff. He's out in the big new world that obviously came about following the end of Mario 1. Mario 1. Dear me, like it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I just think this is really, really interesting. It will be Seth Rogen fronted, I presume, and I don't think there's any point in really looking in terms of game plots, what they're going to be following. We know by this point that Nintendo and Illumination are really very happy to take bits and bobs of different games and, of course, like fashion it into a functioning story structure that lends itself much more well to the cinematic landscape. So I don't think there's anything particularly we can psych out from the games. We could have any range of characters. I'm sure we'll see the return of Cranky Kong. I do think it's very interesting that this is the movie we're getting, because I have to say, I was aware that there were leaks about, not leaks necessarily, but there was, people had seen the copyright last June and there was a lot of discussion to do with that. But when I saw the Velski bum, yep, that's how I get my news. Video pop up, and rightly so. When I saw that video pop up, I thought we were going to be looking at some sort of evidence towards a Smash Bros game, or maybe even we were going to have an official announcement, for a Smash Bros movie. Intriguingly, that is obviously not the case. It's looking more and more likely like this is going to be Donkey Kong's film. And I do have to wonder, will this lend itself more to establishing reasoning for a Smash Bros movie? Because, of course, a Smash Bros movie is going to do phenomenally at the box office. And it's the point that we could see that sort of that team-up movie is where the Sonic franchise, starting in 2020, is now going to be hopefully game to in 2028. So it could be that they're still quite a while off from doing that. But I think it's very interesting, particularly that I think this could be very much used to further establish that. And then after this, we'll obviously have Mario Movie 3. And then a few years after that, would have the Super. It seems pretty likely, to me personally, that we're going to be getting a Super Smash Bros. Movie. There were seemingly endless hints at it in Mario 2, and it seems, more and more likely that we can't really hold this all within the Mario franchise at this point. I mean, flipping Star Fox was in it. Surely that's pushing the boundaries as far as it can go. As to whether, the obvious thing is they'll need to get Zelda in there, the problem is Zelda is looking to be, at least in the movie space, a live-action IP for now. So I'm very, very curious to hear people's thoughts with regards to a potential Smash Bros. Movie. It will, of course, make a lot of money. It will make all the money, arguably. But I think it just seems, very likely that we'll get Donkey Kong movie, then Mario 3, maybe even a year later, and then a few years after that, the Smash Bros. Movie. Because these movies realistically aren't the MCU. Sure, they're building a shared universe, as a lot of things seem to be doing these days. But you are only getting one of these movies every 2 years or so. It will have been 2 years since Mario Galaxy. Should Donkey Kong come out and release as it does? I think it will, because so far they've been pretty good at sticking to their dates with this. Obviously, the original Mario movie took a while to come out, and there was obviously, we'd known for quite a long time that Illumination were going to be involved, but it was quite a slow process. I think Cove was involved with that and all that sort of thing. But from now, they really seem to have hit the ground running, at least in terms of getting things out there. Again, not commenting on the quality of it all necessarily, but in terms of getting things out there, Nintendo are very much making their mark in the cinematic landscape. So I'm very curious to hear what you think about the Donkey Kong animated movie, seemingly releasing April 2028. How do you think this connects to the larger MCU as a whole? That's Mario Cinematic Universe. And what do you think a Donkey Kong fronted movie could look like? I think it's also very interesting to consider the potential financial elements of this. Obviously, Nintendo want to make money. Nintendo always want to make money. They're big on that. They're a business. Capitalism, kid. But I think, on the one hand, Donkey Kong is a very well-known IP. He's all over Nintendo. He's in Mario Kart. He's in Smash Bros. And he's in the Mario movie. So there's no doubt that he is going to make a lot of money. But is he as instantly recognizable a character as Mario? Sure, he's been around for just as long, arguably with more personality for just as long. But will it draw the same audiences as the two Mario movies have thus far, which, as I mentioned earlier, have made big cash? I don't see any likelihood in which that stops anytime soon. You can email the show at hwsnapbreakpodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave your comments in the Spotify or YouTube section down below. Time now for Bendigo's Musical Musings, where in this episode we're going to be discussing all things AJR live from the Hollywood Bowl. Yes, AJR are the band that people love to hate and I love to love. Recently, they performed on October the 4th, 2025, a show in Los Angeles in the titular Hollywood Bowl to massive success, like big numbers there. And much to the delight of AJR fans, in pretty much a big surprise move just a few weeks ago, they dropped a 17-track album called Live from the Hollywood Bowl. Now, the first thing I should clarify here is that I love AJR, and even I will admit that this album isn't going to change people's mind on AJR. If you do not like AJR, you are probably not going to like this album because it is AJR in all their unique and arguably over-the-top glory, and I love it for it. They're performing a lot of their biggest songs, the likes of all the hard hitters. You've got Bang, you've got World's Smallest Violin, Steve's Going to London. There's all sorts of things from a variety of different eras of AJR's career, arguably spanning more towards the recent stuff, as you'd expect. We've got from their latest EP, we've got we've got Betty from their brand new EP, and a lot of things from the Maybe Man and OK Orchestra, as you'd expect, as they've come into a lot more success, arguably, over that period of time. And obviously, OK Orchestra was obviously a big period of time for them, especially considering COVID and how that came in play on TikTok and all that sort of stuff. There's a particularly interesting song in there, though, which has been dropped as a single that I just want to draw attention to. It's called a bunch of songs we haven't played in a really long time. It's about 6 minutes long, and it intertwines a bunch of songs in a wonderful way that only AJR seem to be able to do. It expertly intertwines all these songs that are from a lot of their first albums and EPs that were very successful at the time, but which a lot of newer AJR fans may have less appreciation for, or in cases like mine, who are relatively new to the AJR space, might not have heard that much of. There's admittedly some fun little lyrics in there that are a little bit weird. I've got a note here that says "no tongue drowning" lyric. It's from Break My Face. It's featured in a bunch of songs we haven't played in a very long time. At one point, they even start laughing and say, we haven't played this song in 8 years, which is very, very fun. But the lyric is, you run your mouth, your tongue fell out, it's right there on the ground, but now you'll never drown. You can't. You got no mouth. Which some people are going to hate, but I love it. I just think that's hilarious. On the more serious side, though, there are new versions of Inertia and Sober Up, and they are admittedly quite extreme. You've got like some classical music being intertwined in there. Nobody expects that, but it's still wonderful. A bunch of songs is admittedly the highlight for me personally, because it feels like we're really getting something new here. But nonetheless, as much as I'm not going to be recommending this as people's first delve into AJR, it's really, really exciting for AJR fans to be able to get this as an experience, to relive their favourite songs as if they've never heard them before. And sure, the crowd may or may not be your cup of tea, but overall for AJR fans, I think this is just a really, really fun experience. Being able to hear the band in a more intimate, less refined setting, but still with all of their amazing performative and creative edge, I think is just wonderful. It's about an hour long, it's 17 tracks, there's a marching band finale. Have to say, I'm not a massive marching band guy, but it does sound pretty good, especially at the end of the album. They have clearly very carefully curated this album as well in terms of order, where you're delving throughout the different eras of AJR, and I would recommend listening to it definitely in order. Just as you do, make sure that you don't have it on shuffle, and if you're an AJR fan, please just sit down, enjoy this album, and the 17 tracks are perfectly organised and so much fun. So that really is all I've got to say about AJR live from the Hollywood Bowl. It's not going to change any minds, but that was never really the point. It feels like a wonderful surprise Christmas birthday gift all rolled into one for AJR fans. And I may sound like I'm being dramatic, but especially when, you never quite know when you're going to get a new AJR album. It's not like they have particularly, I don't know if they did for a few years, but we're not quite sure at the moment when new albums are coming. We've obviously had that amazing EP last year that was 5 tracks long. We've still got a deluxe edition of the Maybe Man. We've supposed to got a new album coming out at some stage. And we've also got the Harold and the Purple Crayon adult musical with AJR. Don't know what that's about. Should be good though. So this is a really, really lovely thing to do. It's a 5 stars from me, but it depends on the person. AJR fans, you'll have a little fun. Everyone else, if you've got no tongue, you can't complain about it. And you also can't drown. So, in recent news in the entertainment world, it's been announced that Sarah Cox formerly of Radio 1, Radio 1 Breakfast, The Big Breakfast, Radio 2 Drive Time, all sorts of stuff, is going to be the brand new host of the Radio 2 Breakfast Show. Now, obviously, it's well known Scott Mills exited the Radio 2 Breakfast Show about a month ago. I'm not here to talk about that, which is not to say that I don't have thoughts and opinions about what's happened. It's just that I don't really have anything new to add or offer, and that I'm really just here today to talk about the new host. We are here, though, to talk about Sarah Cox as the brand new host of the Radio 2 Breakfast Show. And really, I don't think this comes as a massive surprise in terms of who was going to be the new host. Sarah Cox has been one of the best presenters on Radio 2 in my personal, again, just personal opinion, for several years. But I think she's clearly just such a capable set of hands in terms of putting out a really fun, entertaining show. She's clearly very down to earth and really, very popular with the listeners, as shown by the fact that she raised like £10 million during her Children in Need big charity run, the proper title of which I've forgotten, which happened last year. But really, there's just so much public adoration for Sarah Cox, and I think it's well known or well appreciated that she is just an incredibly well-versed pair of hands to put on anything presenting-wise, whether it's radio or TV. But obviously, she very much has a big place within radio. As I mentioned there, she's done Radio 1 Breakfast, Radio 1 Drive Time. She's done all sorts of shows across Radio 1. She was on The Big Breakfast on Channel 4 back in the day, and she's been at Radio 2, particularly on Drive Time, for the last 7 years. Even before that, she did loads of covered for Chris Evans when he was on Breakfast. Had her own nighttime show for a little bit before Drive. Just really, really popular and incredibly good at radio. She also hosts the Radio 2 Book Club. Again, just another vote of confidence. And she is an author, so it makes sense. She does several book-related things. She also does Between the Covers on BBC 2, which is a TV show. But still, she is clearly a very, very good presenter. Everyone knows that. Nobody's disputing that. She's really, really good. I just really hope that, with regards to the announcement, though, it was arguably subdued. Sadly, we're not getting all the bells and whistles as we did last time, where you were able to see the past host hand over to the new host and you're able to do all that lovely stuff. That's clearly not the case so much. We sort of got an element of that where it was Trevor Nelson who did the actual announcement, and then straight after that on her show, Sarah Cox could address it herself. So that was quite nice. That built a bit more excitement surrounding it as opposed to just the normal formal press release, where normally, of course, you'd have, the normal form press release you might have expected in this case, where normally you would have the old breakfast show host, as I said, doing an on-air handover, if you will, so and sort of big dramatic announcement. There wasn't quite so much of that, which I think is probably appropriate in this situation, but I hope that doesn't reflect the attitude of the show itself. And, I really don't think it will, but I think, and I know that, I have no doubt that the team behind it will want to go all out on this and they make this absolutely amazing. I just really hope that the BBC, especially with, everything that they've had to deal with in the last few months, I hope that they allow this to be treated like a proper breakfast show. Sure, it's come about in unfortunate circumstances, but I hope they do view this as launching the big new breakfast show, and that they can go all out and they're given all the resources to pursue all the ideas they would, were this not even the case that this was happening in. Were this just, obviously, this has happened because a vacancy has become available on breakfast, but I really hope they allow Sarah Cox, who's just, as I said, an amazing presenter and who's done such a good job on Radio 2 Drive Time for 7 years now, to go all out on it, as I'm sure they will. It's just a minor worry, because obviously they might just want to play things low, but I hope they can go in with a big first show and make a really, really good first impression, as opposed to the potential attitude of let's just quietly get this on so we can have a permanent host. Again, that might be their strategy. I can't comment on what the BBC strategy is for different things. I don't know. I don't work on the BBC. I am just theorising. But I just hope that they allow this to be a big new excitement. Fair that the announcement is somewhat subdued, but I hope that as the show begins, it can really spring into its own thing, and that we can acknowledge it as an exciting thing in itself, because sure, it's unfortunate circumstances it's come about in, but the announcement of getting a new Radio 2 breakfast show is always going to be exciting to a degree. So I really hope they can go all out with that first show and beyond. I think it's also really nice because nobody really knew. It looked like Sarah Cox was going to be on Drive Time for quite a while anyway, and it's clear, obviously, by this announcement that the BBC and the public really, really like her. But this should hopefully give us more time of having daily Sarah Cox on Radio 2, which is really, really exciting, because obviously she has been doing drive time for 7 years now, and sometimes drive presenters do about 7 years and then they're out and then they go to weekends or whatever, or they move to a different station. So really exciting that we can hopefully, all being well, have another long stint of Sarah Cox on Radio 2 daytime, and rightly deserved, because she, as I mentioned, as I keep obsessively saying, really, really good. I think the big question now is with regards to drive time. The spot which is now going to be empty due to Sarah Cox moving to breakfast. She did a joke. She can't do both. I think there's a few possible routes here. On the one hand, Vernon Kay is very, very popular. He currently hosts the biggest show in Europe. There is an argument that Radio 2 wouldn't want to move him because he hosts the biggest show in Europe. That's, of course, the 9:30 to 12 show that he does, which has 10 to the top, the sort of Popmaster replacement, if you will, but I think still pretty solid quiz in its own right. It's it's good fun to listen to. And I think Vernon Kay really settled incredibly well into that slot. I think he was really, really good. He is very popular with the audience again. He's had his own Children Challenge, which has gone very, very well. And there is an argument that they might want to, because as much as the mid-morning show is very big for Radio 2, it's the biggest show in Europe, and as such, the biggest show on Radio 2, there is an argument that so long as you've got a very good top-class presenter in there, as all Radio 2 presenters really are, because they're the biggest station in Europe, there is an argument that so long as you've got somebody on there who's creative and can man the helm very well, that will be the biggest show on Europe. So long as you've got somebody good in there, just because, by matter of fact, of that being the time of day where most people are tuning in, they're having a break, you've got 10 to the top, you've got a quiz. There is an argument that that will stay, and that in most radio stations, breakfast and drive time are the biggest shows. And so you might want Vernon Kay, a big name, moving on to drive time. And then, Vernon Kay obviously is big, well known in the press, but he hadn't been doing loads of radio prior to taking over the mid-morning show. So there is an argument that he might be incredibly well placed on drive as a big name, and that you could get somebody else in who the public will again hopefully really warm up to in that time slot, where it's well known that a lot of listeners are going to be tuning in, and hopefully there's an argument that so long as you've got somebody good there, all will be okay. I think that's more unlikely personally. I think likelihood is they'll want to keep reduce moves as much as possible, especially when Vernon Kay has a well-tested, very popular show there, which is only a few years old and seems to be going great guns. So I think the most likely situation is that OJ Borg moves to drive. As excited as I was about all the announcements last year or end of 2024 with the move of the schedules and everything coming out of there, there was the one lingering thought, I think, for a lot of radio nerds particularly, was that OJ Borg wasn't getting a daytime show. It didn't really look like a daytime show was going to be freed up for a little while. So it looked like OJ Borg, who is amazing on cover, and clearly his whole thing is midnight radio should be as good as something you'd hear in the middle of the day. And I think that's really true of his show. It's an incredibly creative, busy show, and it would be well placed on at any time of day. He's covered for Sarah Cox very frequently, and I do think he's a really, really good option for it. I think he's been waiting in the wings on midnight since 2018. He currently presents from Salford. We know the BBC would probably like to, as part of their expanding across the UK plan, they'd probably like to have a drive time show, really, really big show coming from Salford as opposed to coming out of London. Whether or not that would actually be a logistic problem for the BBC, I don't know. Maybe he will present from London, although I believe he lives in Salford, so I don't know with regards to that. I do think OJ Borg is the most likely option in that he's been waiting for in the wings for quite a while. He's one of the younger presenters at the station, which is something they're probably going to be considering. And he's just really, really good. I highly recommend giving any of his midnight shows a listen, because they are really, really good and would be incredibly well placed on daytime. That would leave a vacancy in the midnight to 3 slot. That could be filled by Richie Anderson, who currently presents sort of Sunday, Monday night in that time slot. OJ Borg currently does 4 days a week in that slot. So you could have Richie doing that 5 days a week. Richie is pretty well known by this point, obviously gaining his start basically on Three Counties Radio and then onwards to Zoe Ball's Breakfast Show, where he did the travel and obviously sort of added an extra voice to that show in many ways. And became an extremely popular presenter in his own right. He was on Strictly. He Did quite a lot of cover, did a lot of the countdown shows, and a few years ago was given his own midnight show on a Monday. So whether he will maybe get midnights, I think would be pretty likely. Arguably, Phil Williams used to host that Monday night slot before Rich Jansen went in there. Phil Williams does still do a bit of cover. I think Rich Jansen is probably more likely to get the gig there, were OJ Borg to move to drive time. I think that would be a pretty strong slot then. There are a few extra shouts. DJ Spoonie has covered for Sarah Cox recently, did a very good job. I personally think he's very, very well placed on the Good Groove. I think that's proved to be like a real surprise winner of recent schedule announcements, and that's been really good. He hosts that very well. That's Good Groove obviously being his own creation, and then they'd have to sort out another show, sort of an arguably more music-based specialist show on at that time. And I think DJ Spoonie is very well placed in loving the music and also being really entertaining and not making it too niche, but also incredibly musically focused. I think he's very, very good at that. My one really rogue shout is Sean Keaveney, formerly of Six Music fame and currently host of the Radio 2 Rock Show. I don't even think they need to move him off the Radio 2 Rock Show. I think he could probably keep doing that. I don't know if that's whether that's recorded, pre-recorded or not. Yes, so the Radio 2 Rock Show with Sean Keaveney is generally pre-recorded. So you'd think that he would be able to do drive time. I think he'd be very, very good for that. Bit of a different tone. Maybe we'd get some more rogue music choices in there, but I would still be... As much as I'm rooting for OJ Borg as the one to get it, because as I said, I think he's been waiting in the wings long enough, I'd love to get Sean Keaveney back on daytime. It's been a few years since Six Music. We obviously got that for a bit with the Daily Grind podcast, but he's since moved to the Radio 2 Rock Show. We're getting him once a week on quite late at night. So to be able to get him back on daytime would be, in my opinion, really good. A really great mind for radio, really creative guy, and clearly just loves the format. So I think he would be very good, but maybe more of a rogue shout. Predictions for me are OJ Borg is going to get drive time. Rich Jansen, as a result, will get nighttime. But what do you think about Sarah Cox as the host of the new Radio 2 Breakfast Show? And what do you think about who will be the host of Drive Time? You can email the show at hwsnackbreakpodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave your thoughts in the comments down below. That is it for this episode of Snack Break, though. Thank you very, very much for listening. Apologies for the lack of uploads over the last few weeks. I've had some quite a lot, pretty big exams recently, a lot of exams, but hopefully within the next few weeks should be able to get back to hopefully somewhat more of a consistent upload schedule. So many big movies coming out over the summer that I really, really can't wait to talk about. For now though, I've been Bendigo Blue. This has been a Hungry Cap Hour production. You can contact the show at hwsnackbreakpodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave your thoughts in the YouTube or Spotify comments. Thanks very much for listening. See you soon. Stay safe. Bye.